All
ending
right.
anyway, so there we
Well, here
go.
we go. Okay. Hey, Ken, lovely to meet you. And I too get up bright and early, as I did this morning. We're going to dive into online educational escape rooms using Google tools. Okay. A little background of me. My name's Sean Arnold. I work live in New York City. In New York City Public Schools is where I work for the last 17, 18 years. I've been in New York City's District 75, which is citywide special education for students with higher needs disabilities. So in that sense, traditional quote unquote instruction doesn't cut it for these kids. I would argue that there's probably a broader range of kids that standing up in a front room talking at them probably doesn't work great for, but definitely for my students. The most important thing on this slide is probably that bit.ly link, which is going to take you to all the resources I'm talking about, all the things I'm sharing about. Keep in mind that capital letters are important in a bit.ly link. So bit.ly NYC capital E escape. So if you get almost nothing else from me in the next 18-ish minutes, get that. That is of key importance. I'll share it again at the end, but if you haven't gotten it, cool. All right, I'm going to forge ahead. But I'll throw that link in the chat and stuff to help you out in just a moment. I think one of the big whys for me of play in general for students and why game-based learning is so meaningful and powerful for me, but specifically in terms of these educational escape rooms, is that you can learn so much about human beings around you through play. Just play a long game of Monopoly to figure that out, and you'll see, whether a person can last long enough to toss the board up in the air or how they get through it and what their strategies are. You really get to know a person. So to that end, let's explore some of the concepts behind educational escape rooms and other whys that I'm very passionate about for it. And I'm starting with the whys simply before I get into how you click this button, do this thing. I think it's always meaningful to dive into the why, because when things go wrong and the Chromebook shuts down and your Guardian isn't functioning totally right, or the Wi-Fi goes out, like, why is this of import? Why should I keep trying? Why should I forge ahead in it? Social emotional learning skills, which probably folks are hearing more and more about, especially post-pandemic, with not even that we're post-pandemic, but post the early stages of it, which hit us really hard in New York City. All these things that by engaging in these digital escape rooms, and let's just say they're digital escape rooms because usually school districts frown upon locking a kid in a room. I don't know why. They have strong feelings about that. So we put them in this digital space where they can go ahead and do it on their own independently. They can do it in groups, and they can do it in a moderated space that teachers can guide and shape educationally, right? So they're communicating with each other. They're have a social awareness of the others in their group that they're participating with. They have to manage their time, imagine themselves in it. They have to work on the relationship they're building with these people. On top of that, and I put 21st century skills there, but I should put future ready skills because that is the better term for it, in the sense that we're well into the 21st century and these should be just innate things. But the kind of skills that whether the kid's going to grow up to work at Google or they're going to work at McDonald's, if those jobs still exist, or whatever it's going to be, they need to learn how to communicate with other people. And even for my students who might use a device to do that because they can't do it verbally, they still need to know how to communicate. They still need to know how to think critically with challenges that force them to do so. They still need to learn to find creative solutions and work with other people, collaborators, digital citizenship, etc. And these Urban escape rooms force that sort of convoluted scenario that require these sort of skills to happen in that space. All right. Beyond that, to make it effective, step one is you got to have an engaging story. And that doesn't mean you have to be a writer yourself and create these stories. Feel free to pull from all pop culture and media and everything you want. So if your kids are super into the Marvel movies, boom, steal those stories, throw them in. If you're reading a text for school, boom, take that story and put it in, make it whatever you want. But story is one of the most important things we do as educators. Everything we do is story. We tell the story of who we are. When a student comes to us, they're telling us the story of who they are, and we're telling them the story of who they are in our lives and how important they are to us. And everything we do is story. I don't want to go off on a tangent, but the whole point of the fact that when we get into very complex ideas and concepts that are very controversial, here in the US, we just had an election, even simple concepts of the earth is round versus flat. People do not respond to facts. They respond to meaningful, compelling stories. That's what all the data, that's what everything shows. And so story is really important. And then we can sort of design meaningfully, and I'll tell you about puzzle variety and mix of tools as we get into it in a second. But it's all heavily about building teamwork. So the platform we're mostly going to be using is Google Forms, connected with Google Sites and some other things for clues, Google Docs, etc. It's a simple step-by-step process. You're going to create a story, write a prompt, create the clues, create digital locks. I don't know why I put that in quotes because they are digital locks, but they're not physical locks that somebody's pounding on. And then you're going to conceivably create a space to house it. And that space can stay in Google Forms, or that space can be in Google Sites. So as we get into this, in the G Suite tools, you'll see a little example here as it looks on the screen. You can dive into a mess in the lab. And this is a specific where a form is embedded in a Google site, right? So again, create a simple story. Hey, look, we're in a brand new breakout. Yay, this is summertime, and we're going to explore all these concepts of summer, all right? In that Google form, what you want to do is you want to go ahead and use the response validation. So yes, you have to require the question, and you have to hit response validation. If you're not sure how to get to that, you hit the little like 3 dots in the bottom right, and that'll let you turn on response validation. If you're not familiar with what that is, if you've ever filled out a form and it's asked you to put in your email address and then told you, I'm sorry, that's not a valid email address, or that's not a valid website, it knows that because response validation. In this case, you can require response validation based on a couple things, either text or a number, depending on what kind of lock it is. So to keep it simple, we are going to create a question in that Google form related to our story. We're going to call it, let's just say, word lock, or you can call it something else related to the specific lock it is. Our answer will be a short answer question, right? And again, we're going to require that question, so they have to answer it. They have to open that lock to move forward. And then they're going to use response validation. And then inside that response validation, you require that the answer has to be exactly whatever the word of your lock is. So let's say that the word of the lock is Clementine, and you'll spell it out exactly. Of course, be careful with capital and lowercase letters. So usually I make sure all my locks are capital letters fully, and I explain that in the description of the lock. All right, and you can get the descriptions again from those same 3 dots. So that's just one lock. Great. And to get past that lock, the student will have to type the exact word Clementine, right? Now, how do they figure out that Clementine is the word, etc.? That, again, can be included in your story or description, right? A little clue that says, well, it's like an orange because we're learning about summer. It's delicious, but, it's not exactly the same as an orange, and it has a longer name, right? That might guide them on that pathway, or you can be more obscure in that regard. It's up to you. But that's a story of one lock. In order to make more locks, you simply repeat that process. Now, whether you want to, just like in a form, make it all on one form page, more or less, or to make it where they have to create each lock in sequence, so they have to open one before they get to the next lock, you simply a matter of putting each question inside of different sections on your Google form. All right? So once you go ahead and create those individual locks, you can go ahead and start to make it part of this larger, amazing story. So in those resources that I shared in the chat, you'll find a few examples that I shared with you. For example, like an 80s game time one. I grew up in the 80s, so I have a love of 80s edutainment games, the sort of Carmen Sandiego's, Math Blastery kind of stuff there, right? Oregon Trail, those sorts of things. So this is a game that you can explore that relates to those sorts of clues. But then you'll note that it's embedded on a Google website or Google Sites. And what's cool is, yes, you embed that form, that's all your locks, but then you can use on the page of that site or multiple pages of your Google site all the different clues and storylines that take students along. And those stories can include things from Google Docs and slides with clues embedded in them and links. Google Drawings is great because you can embed hyperlinks inside of Google Drawings that link to other things. You can embed video, obviously. You can embed Google slide presentations. You can link other websites inside that site. Again, don't make it too complicated, especially if it's the first time you're doing it with a student. Simpler right off the bat is better. But again, there's value even in that student failure if they don't solve it initially that first time. Now, they should not solve it because you made it way too ridiculous and complex and everything. But if it's a matter of it's because they didn't understand the concept that you were trying to address, it's because they didn't collaborate with their peers, well, they will learn from that experience, right? Again, I mentioned those video assessments. If you're using things like Edpuzzle and things, it can include assessment pieces. You can include things like flip videos inside of it or videos within YouTube on side of it. You can use created elements, and I'm sharing links in a moment to show you how to do those sorts of things that include things like custom tickets, custom maps, sort of scratch coding experiences. Again, depending on what you're working on with your students, it can embed any of those things that you're guiding them on, whether you're teaching ELA or STEM or math specific curriculum content or some specific science area like albeit biology, right? It can relate to those specific topic areas. Now, with your Google tools, you can also go ahead and use those visual tools to create things. I told you about drawings and hyperlinks and changing text colors. So simply, for example, if the skill we want students to explore are other languages, well, let's say I have a Google Doc that's set up and it linked from my site, but wait, it's all in a different language like Portuguese or Tagalog or whatever it might be. Well, what if the students don't speak that language? How might they solve that problem? There are some other tools, I don't know, maybe Google Translate, that might help with stuff like that, right? There's also add-ons like Formule and Autocrat and conditional formatting and Sheets, where those color codes can lead to the solutions to, again, it doesn't have to just be word locks, it can be color locks. So what I use for color locks and that formatting when I create the lock is just whatever color order sequence it is, they would type the capital letter of that first word. So if the sequence was red, blue, green, yellow, well, the solution to that lock with that formatting that I mentioned earlier would just be RBG. I'm sorry, red, blue, green, yellow. RBGY. There you go. I know my alphabet, I swear. Again, it can get more complex using those things where Autocrat will automatically send them to places. If you want to dive into that complexity, you can reach out to me on Twitter or something and I'll dive into those. But all of that is also in the resources that I shared along with other examples for you. You can also explore and dive into other additional tools, visuals of things you've created in Canva or class tools that create awesome visualizations within your either, again, Google form, embedding an image, embedding a video, or on that full Google site. There are things like cipher wheels, jigsaw puzzles, breaking news generators, acrostic poem generators. Again, I've included all of these in the resources that you can dive into. Don't start with all of that. Again, start simple, maybe solely in Google Forms with some example locks like I showed. But whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and dive in and explore an adventure like I shared with you. So I am just sharing, am I just sharing this tab? I think I'm just sharing this tab. So I'm going to share this whole page so you can go ahead and see some of the example ones I was pointing to you in your, there we go. So you should have access to this resource that I shared with you, and I'll show you the link again in just a moment. This has example rooms that you can find, like, oh, look, here's a whole world of EdTechlandia. And you can go ahead and, this is a teacher-facing one, which is why I'm sharing these with you. But takes them on an EdTech adventure as they explore different technology tools through this digital escape room where they can go ahead and type in these different locks. Oh, this is a number. I don't know, 1978? Nope. Don't be so independent and ask for some help. So within that, I've sort of embedded a clue as well, so they might know where to go to. Ask for help. Where might that be under here? We could find it. Shape lock, circle, square, triangle, star. Is that right? Nope. Don't forget to flip your lid if you don't get it right away. That might be a clue here. Where did I see something about flip? Oh, in the discussion platforms. So again, those are all embedded in this space. I've got a lot of other examples in here for you that you can go ahead and dive into, some that are student focused, some that go ahead and, that are whole ones that you can go ahead and just copy and utilize yourself, like this spreading kindness escape room or overthrowing a dictatorship escape room, and even this whole build your own escape room template that's built in there for you to do it on Google Slides, as well as ways if you want to reach out to me for suggestions or to do it more for your specific situation or scenario. All right. But with that said, like I said, you can go ahead and connect more in the Google Teacher Center, Google Educator Groups. Go ahead. Let me copy that in case for anybody who joined again later, and I'll stop sharing this screen. That link again, so you can go ahead and get all those resources. And I want to give at least a moment for people if they have any questions or want to dive deeper onto anything that I was chatting or talking about. I'll pause a moment if you got any. Or if not, I hope this was meaningful and worth your time and enjoyable. And I